Imagine walking through a busy medieval town, the smell of fresh bread coming from a bakery, the sound of a blacksmith's hammer ringing, and the lively voices of merchants bargaining for spices and silks. The medieval period was a time of knights, castles, and guilds, where many jobs were passed down from parents to children. Some jobs were dangerous, others respected, but a few offered wealth, safety, and even fame. The journey to becoming a knight started at birth for noble sons, with their small hands gripping wooden swords before they could even walk. By age 7, they were taken from their mothers and sent to another lord's castle as pages, where they learned the tough truths behind the stories of knights. Their small hands scrubbed rust from armor until their fingers bled, and their backs hurt from carrying water for the castle's endless needs. The training was harsh, a mix of physical challenges and mental tests, meant to weed out those who weren't fit for the knight's life. At 14, the boys who survived became squires, and their work grew to include taking care of armor, which could take up to 4 hours a day. They learned to recognize every piece of their knight's armor by touch in dark tents before battles at dawn. The squire's most important job was keeping his knight's warhorse alive, a horse worth more than a peasant's lifetime of work. These huge warhorses needed special horseshoes, custom saddles, and special grain mixtures, all of which the squire carefully prepared. When they weren't preparing for war, knights took care of large estates with great attention to detail. They ran manorial courts, making decisions about stolen livestock that could result in life or death for peasants. Records from Warwick Castle show knights keeping track of every bushel of grain and every egg owed as feudal taxes. The romantic idea of knights hid this practical side. They were just as much tax collectors as they were warriors. Real battles were nothing like the grand tournaments. Before each battle, knights spent a sleepless night in full armor while cold autumn rain leaked through their tents. When dawn arrived, they waded through mud up to their knees, where fallen men were swallowed whole. The lucky ones died quickly from clean sword blows. The unlucky suffocated slowly under piles of dead bodies. Knights who survived often carried hidden scars, a limp from a lance wound that didn't heal right, missing teeth from a mace blow, and nightmares that made them scream in their sleep years later. Before the sun rose over Venice's canals, merchants were already bargaining in the Rialto's dark corners. Their practiced hands checked spices for impurities, rubbing saffron between their fingers to see if it was mixed with dyed corn silk, smelling pepper sacks to find signs of mold. The smartest merchants carried testing tools, small scales to check if goods were underweight, magnets to find lead mixed with silver, and bottles of vinegar to reveal flour cut with chalk. The trade routes across the Mediterranean were like a dangerous chess game, where merchants risked their fortunes on every shipment. A single ship carrying Syrian glass could make a man rich, but pirates waited around every corner. Records from Genoa show that merchants often paid extra, sometimes 20% for armed guards, if they could find brave captains willing to sail during storm season. The most successful merchants became powerful figures behind kings, like Jacques Coeur, who financed the King of France before being ruined by jealous nobles. The Medici family turned banking into a fine art, with their gold coins being accepted everywhere from London to Jerusalem. But most merchants died as they lived, with ink on their fingers and always watching for the next chance to make a profit. Before the first light of day, the sound of the blacksmith's hammer could already be heard through the sleeping village. His forge needed constant fuel, and entire forests were used to fill his charcoal pits each season. The morning's work started with simple tools, fixing plowshares worn down by rocky fields, sharpening scythe blades before harvest, and replacing the many nails that held medieval life together. Archaeological finds in London show that these basic nails were made in standard sizes as early as the 12th century, showing there was already a well-organized trade network. By midday, the blacksmith started more detailed work. Armor parts needed to be heated just right in carefully controlled charcoal beds. Too hot and the steel would break, too cool and it wouldn't shape correctly. Old guild books explain how making a single sword took several days. Folding the steel, cooling the blade in salt water, and polishing the edge with finer and finer stones until it could cut a hair falling down. The blacksmith's shop was the village's unofficial meeting spot. Farmers would hang around, chatting about news while they waited for their tools to be fixed, their talk mixing with the sound of hot metal being cooled in water. The blacksmith often acted like a banker, accepting payment in future work or goods. Records from York show that blacksmiths were often called to testify in court. Their shops had seen everything from marriage promises to business deals. The mill was the village's heart, with its big wooden sails turning non-stop through the seasons and storms. The miller got up before dawn to check the wind, his trained ears already telling him how much grain he could grind that day by the sound of the sails. His hands, always covered in flour, moved carefully as he adjusted the gap between the millstones. If it was too wide, the grain wouldn't be ground well, and if it was too narrow, the heat could set the whole mill on fire. Peasants came in steady groups, carrying grain sacks on their bent shoulders. The miller took his share as he was entitled, sometimes fairly, sometimes using clever measurements when the Lord wasn't looking. His reputation was fragile. Charge too much and people might rebel, charge too little and he'd starve in the winter. The wise miller kept careful records, knowing which families could be pushed and which had sons who were quick to fight. But the mill had darker secrets. At night, while good people were asleep, the miller sometimes welcomed special visitors. Local beer makers paid extra money for finely ground malt. Hunters who broke the law came to him to get rid of stolen meat. And when the taxmen arrived, the mill's hidden spaces kept part of the village's grain safe. Everyone knew what was happening, but no one said a word. The mill was the only place where rich and poor stood on the same level, both needing the miller to stay friendly. The monastery bell rang in the dark hours before morning, calling the monks from their plain rooms. Their wool robes made soft sounds in the cold dormitory as they got up, their breath showing in the candlelight. In the chapel, shadows moved across the stone walls as the monks gathered for matins. Their Gregorian chant echoed under the high arches. This was the first of 7 prayer times each day, regular breaks from their hard work of study, copying texts, and worship. In the soft light of tallow candles, the monks sat down in the scriptorium. The room was quiet, except for the sound of quills scratching and the occasional tired sigh. In front of them were unfinished pages, some with texts that were almost 1,000 years old. Words that might have been lost to time or war. The monks wrote in silence using careful, small Carolingian letters. Each letter had to be perfect. If they made a mistake, they had to scrape the vellum clean with a rough stone. Wasting parchment was seen as a spiritual mistake. Their backs hurt from bending over, and their hands grew stiff from holding goose-feather pens. But they believed this work was holy. Without it, ancient knowledge, Greek ideas, Roman law, and Arabic medicine might have been lost forever. At midday, the monks came together for their main meal: rough barley bread, boiled lentils or peas, and sometimes a small piece of salted fish on special days. They ate in silence while one monk read from a religious book. After a short walk in the cloister to stretch their tired bodies, they went back to work. Some kept copying texts, while others made beautiful decorations, using tiny squirrel hairbrushes to add gold leaf or mix bright colors from ground-up stones. These colors showed how far people traded in the Middle Ages. Deep blue from lapis lazuli brought from faraway Afghanistan, red from mercury mines in Spain, and green from malachite carried over long trade routes. This was the unvarnished reality. Your station was largely determined by birth, your safety by wealth, and your survival by sheer stubbornness. The knight might break a peasant's bones over some slight, and the merchant could buy his way into nobility. Yet together, these lives wove the fabric of an age that would birth our modern world. Their struggles, innovations, and quiet heroisms echoing through the centuries to reach us even now, if we but listen closely enough to the past.